So good self-esteem perpetuates itself. Poor self-esteem perpetuates itself. So to get out of that, you have to stop using the 4Ds and be willing to accept that someone's saying something nice about you.
I am Gloria Grace Rand, founder of The Love Method and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Live, Love, Engage: How to Stop Doubting Yourself and Start Being Yourself. In this podcast, we share practical advice from a spiritual perspective on how to live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically, so you can create a life and business with more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Live, Love, Engage. Namaste. Imagine waking up tomorrow feeling unstoppable in your business, armed with a secret formula to price your worth and negotiate like a pro. Well, stick around because you are going to discover a physician's surprising method to boost your self-esteem, revolutionize your income, and finally claim the success you deserve. But before I bring him on, I'd like to welcome those of you who may be new to Live, Love, Engage. I am Grace Rand, and I help female entrepreneurs attract clients by going beyond search engine optimization to embrace my definition of SEO, spiritually engaging others. And joining us today is Dr. Gary Sprouse. He is a retired primary care physician and author of the book Highway to Your Happy Place, a roadmap to less stress. So without further ado, I am going to bring him up onto the stage right now and welcome you to Live, Love, Engage.
Great. Grace, thanks for having me here. This has been awesome. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yes, me too, because I love, well, number one, I love the name of your book, actually, because I don't know, I think it was last year or something. I was walking along the beach one day and I started making up a song that I'm like, I'm in my happy place, because it is. But I want to dive right in and actually talk about, what I promoted today about self-esteem. So, our audience is entrepreneurs, in particular women entrepreneurs. So how can we go about boosting our self-esteem? Because I know sometimes things happen and we can kind of take a little hit on that from time to time.
Sure. So I'm a physician, right? So here's the weird part. So I consider myself a holistic doctor, because I have all the physiological and all the medical, chemical stuff. I have that knowledge that I learned from medical school, but I've also learned all of the psychological stuff and how the brain works, things like that. And so one of the insights that I've brought to this equation is that the majority of human stresses are actually side effects to our skills. So what that means is we can envision the future, but then that means we have to worry about it. That's the side effect. So my book is basically about how do you keep the skill and lose the side effect. But when it comes to self-esteem, it's such an issue, right? Because first off, we have a definition, as humans have a definition of good and bad. So the side effect that is you could have good self-esteem. The side effect is you could have bad self-esteem. So my dog, she has this cut on her back. She has like a scar and she has a lump on her neck. Doesn't bother her self-esteem at all because she doesn't have those skills of deciding what's good and bad. So the problem with self-esteem is what I found is I'm not sure we all define it as well as we should. So when I talk about self-esteem, I talk about 3 parts to self-esteem. So there's how you feel about yourself, and then how you feel, like what I call self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is where you go, hey, how would I do in the future? Okay. And then the third part is, how do I think about, how do I envision? Well, so let me go back. So it's like, there's self-esteem that's broken up. And then there's a thing called, one of the things that we talk about is achievements. And so what I hear from people about achievements is you shouldn't count your achievements. You should just love yourself for loving yourself. And I don't know about other psychologists, but what I find is when something goes well, I feel really good about myself. And when something doesn't go well, I don't feel good about myself. And so what I realized was our achievements and lack of achievements definitively affects our self-esteem. Whether we like ourselves or not, it affects our self-esteem. The problem that we've gotten into is we don't count all our achievements. So I have this thing that I call the 50-point wake up. So I wake up in the morning and I'm still alive. Yes, I get 10 points. I have food in the refrigerator. Yes, 10 more points. I got running water. Yes, 10 more points. My wife is still alive. Another 10 points. And I'm living in a safe house. 10 points. So I literally wake up, open my eyes, and I just got 50 points. So when then somebody comes along and says, hey, I got this project. If you take it on, you can get 20 points. And you're like, sure. I said, sure, let's do it. And they go, well, but if you don't do it and you fail, well, then you're going to lose 20 points. But I woke up with 50. So if I lose 20, I'm still at plus 30. But if you wake up and you're at minus 10 when you wake up, I'm like, ugh, I'm still alive. I have to go to work. Things aren't good. Somebody comes along and says, hey, I'm going to give you something. You can make 20 points. You're like, yeah, that sounds great. And then they go, yeah, but you could lose 20 if you don't do it. And you're like, I'm at minus 10. I could be at plus 10 and feel good. Ooh, but I'd be at minus 30. You know what? Nah, I'm not going to try. So then they don't even try. So what I found is part of self-esteem then is figuring out, hey, if I count my achievements accurately, there's no way I can't have positive self-esteem. Because we take all these other things for granted. Like I'm still alive. That's not taken for granted. Like I have running water. I have food. None of that's taken for granted. And when you give yourself points for all of that, then there's no way you can't have good self-esteem based on your achievements. Now, there are going to be times when things don't go well, but it won't balance. Like if here's what people do. They go, well, okay, I woke up. That's 1 point. Well, but then this didn't go well. That's minus 10. Well, if you're going to give yourself 1 point for every achievement and minus 10 for everything that doesn't go well, yeah, that's going to make it hard.
So I love that. First off, I think that is so cool. And you're right. I mean, it's not something that we would typically think about doing. And especially, I think it was so important when you talked about just assigning enough points to those things that, like, yeah, you woke up today. Hey, that's pretty good. I mean, it beats the alternative.
Yeah. If you're an entrepreneur and you have a business, yeah, give yourself credit. Like, like I've watched my wife do this. Like we had an apartment building and it needed a screen, and it was a weird size because it was an older building. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know what we're gonna do. She goes, well, I'll just make it. And I'm like, wait, what? Like you can make a screen? And she's like, well, yeah, sure. What? I'm like, okay. So she made the screen and it was perfect. So I'm like, yes, give yourself like 10 points at minimum, right? And she's like, well, whatever. I just had to do it. And I'm like, no, do not give yourself 1 point. Give yourself 10. And then the next day when I said, hey, remember when you made that screen? She's like, yeah, whatever. Now it's 0. And I'm like, no, it's still 10. Come on. Like what? Like, yeah. So that's a problem that I see people do. It also, I see when they look at the picture of themselves. So we have a picture of ourselves in our head, and it changes every 10 years. So those decade birthdays, that's why they're so bad, because you go from, hey, I was 29 years old to now I'm 30. Hey, I was 59 years old, now I'm 60. So when you're 60, you can't say, well, I'm in my 50s anymore. So now you have to have a whole new picture. And in general, the picture doesn't look as promising as it did the last decade. But it's the same kind of problem. So what I found is I said, I had a patient do this, said, write down all your characteristics. You're a mother, you're a daughter, you're a sister, whatever. You have brown hair, you have blue eyes, blah, blah, blah. As many things as you can use to describe yourself. And she ended up putting them in good and bad categories. And what she did was she had like 4 good and 10 bad. And I looked at him like, wait, what? So the first one was that she had an alcohol problem. And I go, okay, all right, that's bad, right? And I said, but then she was a bad mother. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you're a bad mother? I go, do you not feed your kids? Do you not take them to school? Do you not provide food? Do you like ignore them? And she's like, well, no, I do all this, but I shouldn't be drinking as much. I was like, okay, well, I agree that you shouldn't be drinking as much, but the fact that you're taking care of your kids makes you a good mother, not a bad mother. So when we got down to the end, like what we had was 10 things on the good side and 4 things on the bad side. And the good news was the 4 things on the bad side, we could do something about. And so after that, she stopped drinking alcohol. And I was like, yes, right? So you got rid of one of those. But it's the same point system. So I said, you're a good mother, so get yourself 10 points. You have a problem with alcohol, so give yourself minus 10. But it's not, I'm a good mother, 1 point. I have an alcohol problem, minus 10. No, because like I see people, I go, I'm overweight, minus 10. And it's in blinking lights and neon. And I'm like, okay, but you're a hard worker. Well, yeah, whatever. And like, no, it's not whatever. Like, that's 10 points. So what I found is when you go through it accurately, when you go through it accurately, there's no way you can't have positive points, which then leads to your good self-esteem.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
if that's the case, then why don't people have why doesn't everybody have good self-esteem? Right? So there's a couple reasons. One, they don't keep track accurately. They don't give the same score to the good things as they do to their bad things. But here's the bigger problem. So self-esteem starts when you're 1 year old. It's when you first figure out that you're different than everybody else around you. And you start realizing there is a self. That doesn't happen till you're about 1. But here's the problem. Your memory, you have memory. So I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. And when I go up and see her, she goes, Go Pops, because that's my nickname. That's who I am. I'm Go Pops. She's like, Go Pops, can you do this with me? Can we go play on the playground? Because I like having fun with you, blah, blah, blah. So she has memory. But by the time she's 10, she won't remember any of this. It's in her brain, but she won't remember it. She might remember it as a 10-year-old going, hey, remember when you were 2 and we did this, so she can develop a memory of it, but it won't be there. But her self-esteem, so that's there. It's been developing from the time she's 1, but she doesn't have any access to what happened at 1. So you can have all these things happen to you at 1, 2, 5 that you don't even know they are there. So you can, if you start out at 4 years old and decide for whatever reason as a 4-year-old that you don't have good self-esteem, as a 10-year-old, you don't know why you figured that out, but you just do. So now you're stuck as a 10-year-old with low self-esteem and not even knowing why. And usually it's because as a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, you misinterpreted something. So this happens a lot where where someone's been involved in a divorce. So if you're a 6-year-old and your parents get divorced, it's a real common misperception that you caused the divorce. Right? So then it gets stuck in your head that you're so bad that you made your parents get divorced. Now, so this is the next step. So in our brain, this is how I look at it because I think it makes sense and it's easy for people to see. So envision a prism, right? So when you see light coming into a prism, it comes out on the other side as a rainbow, right? All right, so take that idea, and now in your brain there's a prism, and I call it the perspective prism. So now information comes in from the outside or from your inside, and it goes through that prism, and it comes out the other side as your perception. So what's in your prism are things like, hey, what do I believe in? Do I believe in God or not? Do I have good self-esteem or not? What experiences have I had in the past? You know, how am I awake or am I half asleep? Am I anxious or am I upset? All those things factor into that prism, which then change your perceptions. But if one of the things in that prism is that I am bad, like I have low self-esteem, well, that's going to affect literally everything that comes into your window, right? Everything you sense, everything that people say to you, everything that you hear about yourself, right? All your own self-talk will be in there, and it'll filter through that thing that says, yeah, you're not that good a person. So when that happens, and somebody says, like, if you have low self-esteem and somebody comes along and says, hey, Dr. Sprouse, you're the less stressed doc. I think you're a really good guy. And I'm like, I have good self-esteem. I go, yeah, that makes sense. If somebody comes along and says, hey, Dr. Sprouse, I think you're a bad doctor. And I'm like, wait, what? That doesn't fit what's in my prism. And then I do something I call the 4 Ds. But basically, you start adjusting the information to reduce the dissonance there is between those two things. So when you have good self-esteem and somebody comes along and says you did something bad, you do this thing to create distance and go, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know who I am. You got some alternative motive. And then you come out of the other end with good self-esteem. But the opposite happens too. So if you have low self-esteem and somebody comes along and says, hey, you're really good at that. And you're like, you don't know what you're talking about. You just want some other thing. Like that does no, you just don't know who I am, or you're an idiot, or you're. And so what happens is when you start out with low self-esteem, it's really hard to change because you're going to literally ignore good stuff that comes in or minimize it and magnify anything that comes in that says you're bad, because that fits with what you think. So it really makes it difficult to start changing self-esteem, because it started when you were young and you didn't, it's there, but you didn't know. And two is you're manipulating the information in a negative way. So it's really hard.
Well, we're going to take a short break real quick. And when we come back, I would love you to maybe elaborate a little bit more on those 4 Ds that you mentioned, and also maybe talk a little bit about negotiating with confidence as well. So we'll be right back. And I just want to let you know, if you have been enjoying the podcast, there is just a small amount of time left now to show your support by voting for Live, Love, Engage. We have been nominated for a Women in Podcasting Award in the Mindset category. And you can actually vote for us until 6 p.m. Eastern time on October 1st, 2024. So like I said, time is getting very short to do this. So you can go to womeninpodcasting.net/awards, look for Live, Love, Engage in the Mindset category, and you will be able to vote for us. And I really, if you do, I'm just want you to know I'm very, very grateful for it. I really appreciate it. And I also wanted to let you know too that I am a firm believer in the power of community, and also having people to reinforce, when you are feeling like you've got poor self-esteem, to be able to lift you up again. And that's why I launched the Soulful Women's Network. And so this is a wonderful group where fun, creative, powerful women get together to support each other in business and life. So we've got a free community that you can check out. You can just go to bit.ly/Soul Network, and Soul Network is all one word in lowercase. I will have it in the show notes as well for you to do that. But I hope you will come and join us, and maybe even come and join us monthly, because we have monthly masterminds as well. All right, enough of that. I want to go back in and bring Dr. Gary back in here now, and let's see if I can figure out where to do it on. There we go. All right. So you were mentioning before I took that break something about the 4 Ds. So and it seemed like you mentioned one of them, but I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit more.
All right. So here's the 4 Ds: deny, deflect, diminish, and dismiss. Okay. So the first one is deny. So if somebody says you're a good person and you don't think that, you just don't hear it. And I see that a lot. People just literally can't. Sometimes it's actually hard to hear somebody telling you a good thing, and you just kind of they didn't say that. You just totally ignore it. The other one is you deflect. Is if somebody says, "Hey, you're doing a good thing," you're like, "Yeah, isn't the weather nice outside?" Like, just kind of like go to another place. The next one is diminish. If someone says, "Hey, you did a good thing," you're like, "Okay, well, you said I did a 10, but I know it's only a 1, so you just diminish what they." And the last one is dismissed, and you go, okay, that person doesn't know what you're talking about. They don't have the right information. They don't know who I am. They don't, they have some ulterior motive. So what I find, those 4 Ds are what people do to try to correct the distance that's coming in between them. So if they have good self-esteem, they're using the 4 Ds to figure out why somebody would say something negative. But if they have poor self-esteem, then they're using the 4 Ds to try and figure out why someone would say positive to them. That's why. So it becomes a self-perpetuating issue. So good self-esteem perpetuates itself. Poor self-esteem perpetuates itself. So to get out of that, you have to stop using the 4 Ds and be willing to accept that someone's saying something nice about you. So one of the things I've been working on with my patients, this is where the doctor part comes in. So in our brain, there's a track, and the track says, hey, 2 + 2 = 4, or, I'm bald, or whatever, right? So one of the tracks here's what I find, that people have a track that says I have good self-esteem, but they also have a track that says I have poor self-esteem. And the difference is, if they have poor self-esteem, that track is really thick, and the good self-esteem track is tiny. So what I work with Paige said, hey, and I say this to them, you need to build up the track that says I have good self-esteem. So that becomes your prism, then changes. So now the prism starts shifting and you go, oh, I have good self-esteem. So now you start using the 4Ds to enforce that as opposed to denying it, right? So
Right.
that's one of the ways to build up your self-esteem. The other way is to look at the three categories, and I think I was trying to say this earlier, and the three things are to say self-worth, which is, am I a good person?
Mm.
Self-respect, which is, am I doing things the right way? And self-efficacy, or what I call self-confidence, which is, how will I do with a future thing, with future task, right? So I have seen patients that have a lot of self-efficacy. If you say, hey, can you play basketball? They're like, yeah, dude, I've never played before, but I know I'm good at it. But then when you say, well, how's your worth? They go, yeah, well, not so good there, right? So you have to differentiate which part of that self-esteem equation is having the difficulty.
Well, you know, and I love when you were talking too about these 4Ds, because this is something that how I handle that when in teaching my clients is to the love method. The V in love is to value your uniqueness. And what you were talking about before, it's like I could see, I think we might want to work together here, because I think it would be a great way to combine it, because then I could say, okay, well, let's assign, not only look at what what's unique about you, but let's assign some points to that as well. I think would be really, really cool.
Okay, but here's one of the cautionary tales that I had to learn the hard way, unfortunately. So the lady I was telling you about, so what I do is I have a stick figure and I have them label it, right? And so we went through and we figured out that, hey, her point system, she had 100 good points and 40 bad points, and she could fix some of the 40 bad points. And I'm patting myself on the back on, oh, I fixed this lady's self-esteem. And then I looked at her, and you thought I punched her in the stomach. And I'm like, whoa, what happened there? Like, wait, whoa. So then she said, well, if I'm wrong about this, if I'm wrong about myself, what else would I be wrong about? And you're like, oh, wait, what? Yeah. So remember how I said that self-esteem is in that prism, and literally everything that you think and feel and anything inside of you and outside of you is gone through that prism. And that's something that's been there since you were 1 year old and you didn't even know it was there. And then somebody says you're wrong. Yikes. Yeah. It's just disturbing is what I found out. So you can't just jump in and go, hey, I'm fixing your self-esteem in 5 minutes, because you have to warn people. You have to let them grow the good self-esteem track in their brain a little bit at a time. And then they can accept, okay, yeah, you're right, I am a good person. So.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Absolutely. Because as someone who has dealt with that myself, I know that it definitely takes some time. But I do love this whole basic premise, though, about being able to at least give you a way to be able to more accurately judge it. And I think that's
yes,
the real good thing. I think one of many that you have come up with, but I think for me, that really stood out for me. So one of the things that you talk about as well in helping clients is about being able to negotiate with confidence, because I know this is something I haven't always been the greatest at. I will say I'm getting better. But what advice do you have for someone who is and this applies to really not even in business, because a lot of times we have to negotiate things maybe with our spouse or with our children sometimes. So how do you approach this, and what advice do you have for people?
Okay, so there's a couple issues. So the first one is what we just talked about, self-esteem. So if you have low self-esteem, that's going to make it harder for you to negotiate. So the more you bump up your self-esteem, the more remember that part I said, self-efficacy, self-confidence. The more you have of that, the better you're going to be in a negotiation, because you're going to be saying, hey, that's not right. You're treating me poorly. If you have low self-esteem and someone treats you poorly, you kind of expect that. And so then you would go, okay, well, they're treating me poorly, but I guess that's what I'll just have to live with. So if you come in with self-confidence, meaning, hey, I know I'm a good person, I know I'm doing things the right way, and I know I can do a successful task in the future, well, you're going to be way better at negotiating right there. The second is, there's plenty of books on how to learn how to mediate. And so one of the books that I read was called Getting to Yes. And one of the things that it talks about is don't talk about people, talk about the issues. So leave it at issues. Don't say you're a jerk. Go, hey, like, I know you don't like the way the economy's gone, and I have a way I'm going to fix it, and you have a way you're going to fix it. Instead of saying, well, you're a jerk and your answers are wrong, you go, okay, what's the problem? And what's your solution? And what is it where are we trying to get to? And when you start focusing on the objective and where you're trying to get to, well, then you can go, well, your way might get there, my way might get there, but let's look at, and now you can start looking at statistics and looking at models and predictions and things like that. And instead of yelling at each other and being mad at each other, which has no help at all, you're now negotiating out and then finding a way to measure the objection. So if you go, okay, we're going to talk about the economy. Well, how are we going to measure it? We're going to measure by GDP. Or we're going to measure by, unemployment rate. But when you have an objective measure, then you can at least say, okay, well, using that objective measure, this is how we think we should go.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I appreciate that it really does start with you being able to have you've got to be able to start building that confidence muscle so that then you can have those conversations. Because I know definitely just in having discussions with my significant other in the past where he was really strong on this is what he believed, and I just really didn't agree with it, but I didn't have the facts to back it up. So I couldn't really engage in a decent discussion with it. So,
right, but that's when you can say, hey, you know what? Give me 5 minutes. I'll be back. And
that's true.
Continue, because like, there's no, I have to have it right this second. You can come back and come later. And when you have the facts, then, so emotions are nice, but when you're trying to negotiate something out, they tend to get in the way, right? So particularly if they're the wrong emotion, anger, when people are angry, they don't listen to each other at all. So if you find yourself arguing with somebody and there's anger involved. So like, I just had a discussion with my mom the other day about politics, and it was contentious, but at the end we both said, yeah, I love you.
That's good.
Right? We were both on very different sides of this, and our perspective prisms are very different. So our perceptions then are very different. Right. So we were having these discussions, but we kept anger out of it. And what I got out of the conversation was there was a lot more in common with what we were saying than there was not in common. Some of it was just a matter of who was going to do it and how they were going to do it. Right. It wasn't like we both said, immigration needs to be fixed, but we need to have it done legally. It's not that we don't want immigrants, we just don't want illegal immigrants. And so then it was just a matter of how do you figure out how to fix the problem? Well, so that changed the whole tenor of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I was going to say is that one of the other big problems that humans get into is worry. And I was listening to some of your other podcasts, and people talked about fear and anxiety and worrying about what's going to happen. So worry is like a major problem that humans have, and it affects your negotiations, because if you're worried about something, you're not going to be as strong in your negotiation. But here's what I found. So when I asked people to tell me what worry is, well, pretty much everybody has some sense of what the word means, and they know what it feels like. And when they use it in a sentence, people understand what they're saying. But when you go to try to define it, it's not so easy, because I see people struggle. I've seen professionals struggle going, well, it's, it's worry, right? And I go, well, it's fear, it's this, it's that. I'm like, well, but if you don't know what worry is, then how can you fix it? And I liken it to when we were in doctors a long time ago. What we knew about diabetes was that your sugar was too high. Well, okay, if that's all I know about diabetes, then I'm going to say to you, don't eat as much sugar and you'll be better. And some people were better, but most people weren't, because not eating sugar doesn't really fix most people's diabetes. But now that I know as a doctor that, it has something to do with your stomach hormones and your insulin levels and your insulin transport and your liver and your blah, 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 right? Well, now I have all these tools. So now that I have more knowledge, I'm way better tools. And so our treatment of diabetes has changed dramatically just since I've been a doctor, and to the better, right? They're so much better. So what I found with things like worry, that people don't, when you ask them what it is, they really don't have a very good definition. So when I say, hey, look, so first off, worry you can't work like I tell a story. My dog and I are watching the TV and we're looking at the war in Israel and Ukraine, and we're hearing about immigration and political fighting and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there going, oh, I'm getting all upset. And my dog's just laying there. I'm like, you're watching the same thing. What's the matter with you? Why aren't you paying attention, right? So the problem is my dog doesn't have the skill of envisioning the future.
Mm-hmm.
So she literally can't worry. Like, it's not possible. So my 4-year-old granddaughter, she can start to worry a little bit. My 1-year-old grandson cannot.
Right.
And then I had a lot of patients with really end-stage dementia. They don't have the skill anymore. So they can't look into the future. So then they can't worry. So here's my definition. So worry is I use my incredible skill of being able to envision the future. Then I focus on all the bad things that can happen. And then the last piece, and this is the worst, is then I have a fear reaction right now.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a little anxiousness. It might be a full-blown panic attack, but it's a fear reaction to some bad possibility, right? And the reason I can even look at it in the future and look at bad possibilities because I have this amazing mind.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Does not have this problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're gone into a negotiation and you're worried, you're focusing on all the bad things that can happen out of this negotiation, and then you have the fear reaction right now. Do you think that's going to help you negotiate?
No, not at all.
So one of the ways, so I have two thought. I mean, if you want to hear, I have two tools that I use. I mean, there's more, but two that I talk about. So the first one is what I call realistic optimism. So that means that I'm going to envision the future, and I have the choice. I can focus on the bad things, or I can focus on the good things, because neither of them are real. They're both just concepts. They're both just ideas. So what I say is, look, I'm going to focus on the good. So when I was writing my book, if I focused on the bad things, then I would say, well, I'm never going to get this book done. Even if I get it done, it will never get published. Even if it got published, who's going to read it? Well, that makes you feel bad now. Then you won't finish the book. But if you go, hey, this book is going to be awesome when I get it done, and it's going to get published, and it's going to change people's lives. What? Yeah, that makes me feel good. Let's get back and start writing, right? So that's the optimism part, that I focus on the good things that could happen. And here's the caveat. Here's the realistic part of that definition. So realistic optimism, I can't ignore the fact that bad things could happen. So I can't say, oh, it's going to be wonderful and it's going to be great, and I'm just going to quit my day job because I'm going to make so much money at this book. And then whoa, right? So you have to pay attention that bad things could happen, but then you can address those without fear. And that's where the second tool comes in. So the second tool is what I call a worry organizer. So I'm going to give you a patient's example so you can understand it. So the first category is, what is it you're worried about? So this lady came to my office and she was like in her 40s. And she said, well, I'm worried I'm going to get breast cancer. So the second category is, why are you worried about that? So in her case, her mother and her sister both had breast cancer. Excuse me. So that brought us to the third category. So the third category is 2. It says, how likely is it to happen? And how bad would it be if it happened? So I asked her those questions, like, how likely are you going to get breast cancer? She said, well, 100%. My sister and my mother both had breast cancer. And I go, well, if you got breast cancer, how likely is that you would die? She said, 100%. And I'm looking at her like, well, no wonder you're upset. Like, you've given yourself a death sentence. So I said, okay, so she was now that we put it in these categories, I said, I'm a doctor. Here's the real statistics. Here's the statistic we have in medicine. So with the family history, you have a 15% chance of getting breast cancer. And she looked at me like, wait, what? 15%? That's it? And I go, yeah. And I said, because we're going to find it early, you have 85% chance of survival. And you could see that her body literally changed.
Absolutely.
She had just gotten her life back. So then the fourth category is that, okay, what can I do to make sure it doesn't happen? So in her case, we started doing mammograms and self-exams, and we did a blood test for her gene and blah, 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 right? And then the last category, which is an interesting category, is like, what do I do if it happens? And here's what I've seen. When people prepare for the bad, then they don't worry about it as much. They don't have
That's
that
right.
fear because they're prepared. So we started talking about like, okay, well, let's make sure your will's set up. Let's make sure your sister and your husband have signed a letter saying you're going to take care of your kids this way. And you're going to put this dress on me when at the funeral, and you're going to, right? And so now, and here's the key, that it's written down. Because one of the problems with worry is that it's very inefficient. People go over and over and over.
Oh, right. Yeah.
2 o'clock in the morning. Right. Okay. So when it's written down, it takes a little bit more effort, but then you only have to do it once. So then if you wake up and there's something else you think about, you go, oh yeah, I already wrote all that down. So it's no big deal. And the other benefit to writing down is then you can take it to your family, to your friend, to your husband, to your doctor, and go, hey, here's what I wrote down. Can you add? Are my statistics accurate? Is there anything else I can do to prevent this? Is there anything else I can do if I get it? Right. So now you have something that you can share with everybody else. That's not just in your head. It's out on a piece of paper, and it's always there so that you can have it by your bedside if you want. And you can make one for each worry that you have.
I think that's excellent advice. And I absolutely see the value in this because, yeah, it's so easy because when our imaginations are so wonderful, but they can also really spin out of control when we're in that fear-based state. But yeah, treating it the way you're recommending it and getting information, number one, I think get some research behind you is certainly important. And then, yeah, being able to look at it realistically. So I like that so much. We're rapidly running out of time here, and there was so much more I wanted to get to,
I
but
talk too much. Dang.
no, but it's all good. It's been all good, and I've even got a comment here. Oh, okay, very nice, Joy. Well, I'll even put this up here. Joy says, "Very wise words, Dr.
Thank you,
Sprouse."
Joy.
I appreciate that.
Well, I hope they help you. The key is I'm not here to help me. I'm here to help you, right? That's my whole
Absolutely.
goal here. And
Yeah.
when somebody comes to me and says, hey, you said something and that helped me, like, that makes me feel good.
Absolutely.
That
Well,
puts me in my happy place.
yeah, there you go. Absolutely. That's where we all need to be, in our happy
Yeah,
place.
sure.
Is there anything else that I should have asked you about that I didn't? Any other last point you want to make regarding anything we've talked about today, or maybe even just about, being less stressed or being in your happy place, maybe even?
Yeah. Wow. So we have to do this again because there's way more information in my head than I need to get out to your listeners so that they can help themselves. We didn't even get to talk about your happy place, right?
I
That's a
know.
whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But here's what I say to people at the end of my interviews. What I say to them, I look them in the eye and go, look, you might be stressed out right now, but you don't have to be. There's ways that you can get rid of some of the stress, that you don't have to live your life overwhelmed, stressed out, low self-esteem. It doesn't have to be that way. There are ways to fix this. My book's one of the ways. There's a whole bunch of other books. You can listen to Grace. She's got some good stuff. I was listening to some of her podcasts. Good stuff. Don't resign yourself. Don't use this thing that I call learned helplessness where you go, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just stuck there. No, you have all kinds of options and all kinds of tools. There's one of my instructors told me, he goes, when somebody's getting a bad outcome, they always have the tools inside themselves to get the better outcome. So what I tell people is don't resign yourself to living a stressed out life. You can get to your happy place and stay there.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree with that 100%. We always have the choice of how we want to be in any moment of our life. We just need to decide. In fact, I was experiencing this over the weekend. In fact, I was not feeling very chipper, and I had a lovely luncheon to go to, and I just was like telling myself, you know what? No, I don't want to go there today. I want to be in a happy place. I'm not giving into this today. And then when I went to the luncheon, I met someone who was going through the exact same thing, and
Oh my God.
we laughed about it. It's like, I don't know what was going on in the air today, but it was just so funny that we were both kind of like,
so I
no,
do
we don't want to
seminars
be
now.
this way.
Yeah. So I do seminars on how to help people get to their happy place and get rid of some of their stresses. And the day of my seminar, like literally half the people called and said, we can't come. And some of them called and said, I'm too stressed out to come. I'm like,
Oh, no.
no, that's the
No.
whole reason to come, right? Yeah. So this is what I say: come, like, yeah, like, read this stuff, do these things, right? Because you can. There's ways to help this, and then you can
Absolutely.
get a better outcome.
Absolutely. And one last thing I want to ask, and is if someone listening to this today would like to get maybe a copy of your book or to learn
Sure.
more about you, where can people go to find out?
Yeah. So the book is called Highway to Your Happy Place: A Roadmap to Less Stress, and it's on Amazon and it's on Barnes and Noble. And then if you want to, I have a website that's 𝙬𝙤𝙧𝙩𝙗 at .com. And then I have an email if you want to get in touch with me. It's 𝙤𝙧𝙯𝙗@gmail.com. But I forgot to tell you, I just had a book come out. I was a co-author with Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. And so the collaborative effort with 29 other people, and a book called Mindset Matters. And it became a #1 bestseller. Yay. So, so that book's out there too. And in my work, mindset, like, the reason I got involved with that was because I agree, mindset matters. And so I wrote a chapter for the book with some other people. It's an excellent book. So you might want to get that, because that will help you envision your own mindset and see how it would affect your life.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I will be sure and have all of that information in the show notes. So if you're listening or watching on YouTube, I'll make sure that it's in the description there as well. So thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed and was educated as well. So that's always a good thing.
Well, thank you for having me. And we have to do this again.
Absolutely.
And hopefully your audience got something from this. That'd be great.
For sure. And I know, at least I think Joy did. And so thank you, Joy, for watching today. And I'm glad that she got some value out of it too. So excellent. All right. Well, I want to also now thank all of you for watching and for listening today. And I really appreciate you. And I hope that you did get some value. And if you're not subscribed to the podcast, I encourage you to do that. We're on all the major platforms. And as well, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. So until next time, as always, I encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and okay, well, let me try that again. Live fully, love deeply. I know what I was going to say, but I'm going to say it right this time. Engage authentically.